Welcome to Highside, Lowside. This is episode 8 of season 10. I am Spurg. I am joined as always by my co-host Zach. And today we're getting into group rides. The highs, the lows, the what you should do, the what you shouldn't do, the how to make friends, how to lose friends. We're also going to talk about intersection etiquette, as well as a tip of our cap to our abroad audience. All that and much, much more. But first, a word from our sponsor, Motul.
Quick shout out to the biggest supporter of Highside, Lowside. That's Motul. Now, maybe you're thinking, gosh, I'd love to help out Zack and Spurg, but I'm not into motorcycles yet. I spend too much time with my nitromethane burning radio-controlled car or helicopter. Well, we've got great news. In addition to oil for full-size vehicles, Motul makes micro premix oil specifically for alcohol-fueled small displacement two-stroke engine. Are you surprised? Don't be. Head over to RevZilla.com/Motul to learn more about all of Motul's products. That's RevZilla.com/MOTUL.
And while you're over there on RevZilla.com, make sure you check out the RPM program. That's the Riders Preferred Membership Program, now only $39.99 a year. You get all kinds of discounts on motorcycle gear and apparel. You get $15 for just signing up, free 2-day shipping, concierge service, and it works across all of RevZilla's sister brands. That means J&P Cycles, Cycle Gear, RevZilla, and Rever. To learn more about all the benefits of the RPM program, head over to RevZilla.com/RPM. That's RevZilla.com/RPM. Now, on with the show.
Welcome, everybody. Here we are. Set your cruise control for mildly interesting. It's just Spurge and I today on Highside, Lowside. We are talking about group rides, as we said. Before we do that, though, a quick reminder to send us your favorite motorcycle classified finds and any stories you have of Am I the A-hole, which we like to circle back to every now and then, which is pertinent, Spurge, to today's warm-up conversation.
Yeah, so we are talking about all things group rides today, and I'm coming fresh off a weekend of group riding at a off-road event. Yeah,
right.
So I'm all primed for this conversation.
Yeah,
I'm excited. But Alex had sent us an email, and Alex said, "Am I the a-hole?" And it has to do with, not necessarily group rides, but what do you do in certain situations when you're out there on the road? And
it has to do with on-road communication.
There you go, which is something we're going to get into in today's episode.
Sure. Yeah.
So Alex's email goes a little something like this. When I come to a four-way stop, cars who arrived at the stop before me try to be nice, and they wave me across, even though it's not my turn. I hesitate as they arrived to the stop first, and the longer this awkward standoff lasts, the more cars pile up behind us. Should I be grateful that some cars are just looking out for us, and they want us to go ahead? Or is it okay to be annoyed that they're confusing the whole intersection with this nice gesture? Alex, he wants to know.
I love this question.
Or he or she want to know if they are the a-hole.
So Alex comes to an intersection, and the cars are yielding, even though the car clearly has the right of way. They're like, no, you go first. You're a motorcyclist. And then Alex is presumably thinking, but that's not how it works.
We should note that in America, because I think this is something that Zach and I were talking about ahead of time around like the rules of the road in different countries. But in America, if you are the first to come to a four-way stop, you are then allowed to proceed first. If two vehicles arrive at the exact same time, it is customary that the vehicle on the right is the one that proceeds first. Those are
which presumably, if you're in England or Japan or somewhere where you drive on the other side of the road,
might have a different set of laws.
Well, you would, if you arrive to a four-way stop at the same time as someone, you would yield to the person on your left, I assume, for the same reason, because it would be, yielding to the turning, whatever. Okay, I'm going to cut to the chase, Spurge. I like this complaint, and I do not think you're the a-hole, Alex. I think the car drivers are the a-holes. Now, are they a-holes in a classic sense? They're trying to spread negative energy and malice throughout the world? No, they're trying to be nice. But in trying to be nice, they're making everything confusing. And I agree with you. I think it's a pain. I think it's hard. You need to trust the other drivers to follow the same etiquette and rules of the road that you're expecting them to. And if it's just like you can't tell. If you can't tell what they're going to do and you don't, and they're going against the grain of what you've always expected in every other situation, it makes everyone confused.
I'd like
Spurge?
to do a high side, low side poll right now. And I want you to all ignore that Zach and I just explained to you what the actual rules are if you come to a four-way intersection. How many people out there listening right now actually know who goes first if two people show up at the same time to a four-way intersection? Because I'd be willing to bet that there's a lot of people out there that just don't know. And
so it could be ignorance. It could be just sort of like they're trying to be polite and they don't understand. They don't know the quote unquote rules of the road. That's what you're saying?
yeah. Like what happened? Let me ask you a question. And I'll be honest, because I did not do my homework on this. What happens if two people arrive first opposing one another and one person has a turn signal on? Like, let's say you and I are coming at each other and you've got your turn signal on to cut in front of me. Like, what's the rule there? Turning left, drivers must yield in oncoming traffic even if they've arrived first. So like, again, but like my point is that like, I'd be willing to bet that if you were to quiz everybody listening to this podcast right now, there's more than a few people that would be like, I don't know what the rule is to that. Right. So I am giving these other drivers a little bit of leeway here. Maybe Alex is superior in his or her MSF / driver knowledge, but maybe it's just like, hey, they're waving you on, just go ahead and move forward.
Well, I'm going to throw out some advice here. Not that anyone asked, but I will hope that it will reach someone and help in some way. I think communication is the key here, right? Like you can, as a driver of any vehicle, including a motorcycle, you can communicate with the other drivers on the road and you can give some not so subtle cues. Like you could, if you want someone, if you anticipate someone yielding to you when you wish they wouldn't, you could, put your helmet down, make it look like you're looking at your gas cap or something like that. And then they'll be like, oh, they're not looking to go, so I'm going to go. Like you could send sort of like a body language cue like that. You could also, most motorcycles idle. So you could theoretically use your right hand, your throttle hand to just like wave them through. Just be like, no, you go ahead. And you could be preemptive about this. And you might end up in an awkward situation in which you are gesturing the person to go through the intersection as they have already done it. And they're sort of like, yeah, I'm going, buddy. You don't need to tell me to go. But the point is, over communication in these situations, always better than under communication, in my opinion.
Yep. I would say that is a good rule of thumb. And I will just leave you with the actual rules of the road for those of you that may have failed the quiz that we just threw out 60 seconds earlier. The right of way goes to the first to arrive. So whoever arrives at the four-way intersection first, that is the first person to go. A tie goes to the right. If two or more vehicles arrive at the stop at the same time, the driver on the right has the right of way. And if you are opposing traffic, so if Zach and I were to pull up looking straight at one another, drivers turning left must yield to any ongoing traffic that's straight, even if they arrive first. So presumably if you and I arrived and I'm making a left-hand turn, I would let you come straight first. Or if I'm making a right-hand turn and you're coming straight or you're making a right-hand turn, we could go at the same time.
Correct.
But this also brings up a very important fact, something that I know that Zach Quartz is very passionate about because we've discussed this in the past. Use your turn signals. Even if there's no one else on the road. That's right. It's just good muscle memory. Use your turn signal.
I saw a great bumper sticker the other day that just said, "It's a lovely day to use your turn signals." And I was like, that's a good, it's fun. Okay, Spurge, one last thing here. I'm going to do a throw to Common Tread. That is the RevZilla online magazine that includes a new story in and about motorcycling every day, 5 days out of the week. There's an article that was published in 2023 called How to Be a Safer Driver Around Motorcyclists. A bunch of us contributed to this particular article. It's sort of like a staff collection of little pet peeves and whatnot. If you have people, perhaps you're even interested, you could see the article if you want. Again, it's called How to Be a Safer Driver Around Motorcyclists. And basically it had a list of stuff that we find annoying as a group of motorcyclists. It can be helpful for people who are driving around motorcyclists and want to know how to better interact with them, or anyone else who is sort of confused or otherwise uninformed on the topic.
I would say just not even other motorcyclists. Like I think everyone listening to this podcast, I would hope, is someone interested in being a better rider or a better driver or just being more engaged in how they operate a vehicle, whether that's a motorcycle or a sports car or, a van as they're riding to a motorcycle event, like just go above and beyond. Like the lowest common denominator of like, oh, I got my driver's license in North America, as I'm reading about more and more states like dumbing down the driver's license tests in order to get more people through to pass.
Right.
Just always try to be a bit better than average in your driving experience, whether that's with a motorcycle or on four wheels. And with that, let's move on to talk about group rides, because we're going to hit on a lot of this in the conversation today of riding with other people, being on the road, being on the trails, being out there with other riders, whether that's cars or motorcyclists. And we want to start off with a little bit of an introduction. We broke the introduction down into two parts. I'm going to take part one. Zach is going to take part two. So what do we mean by group rides? And I think this is a good question because it could be a little bit of everything. And some of the areas that we're going to touch on today will be adventure and off-road rides. You're going to be going out to an adventure event or an off-road event. You're going to be riding with other people. Large gathering rides, distinguished gentleman's ride, a poker run on the street, things like that. Get large gathering rides, parade laps, toy runs, things like that for street rides. We're going to talk about track days. Track days are you're riding at speed on a racetrack. That is a group ride. You're out there with other people. And then just plain old riding with friends. And I think riding with friends might have a little bit of a tie-in with ADV or distinguished gentleman's ride or track days. But like riding with friends, you're going to gather at a coffee shop on a Saturday morning and go for a ride. We're going to kind of hit on some of this as well. So that's kind of like the main idea of what we're talking about when we're getting into group rides. Zach, why don't you take the second part of this intro?
General pros and cons. On the plus side, group rides are a great way to meet new people, meet like-minded riders who are interested in the same kind of stuff. You could discover new routes, new roads, new trails. You could get to ride in areas that are otherwise off limits because they're open for this particular group ride. And on the con side, those include but are not limited to you being open to other people's mistakes on the road. You're surrounding yourself with people you might not know. You could learn bad habits from riding with people that do things that are inadvisable, but you don't know any better because you've entered into this group riding relationship with them. You could also feel pressure to ride slower or faster than you feel comfortable with. So that's sort of a basic breakdown of general pros and cons that really apply to lots of different types of group riding. But it's very complicated. It matters the type of person. It matters how many people are in the ride. It matters the terrain. It matters the weather. There's lots of different things, lots of different nuance and to all these situations. So today we're going to talk about a few different scenarios, a few different rides, and the different types and how you should expect them to go if you're not familiar. Maybe how to find some group rides if you are interested. Etiquette that you can apply across the board, or how etiquette might differ from different disciplines, and much more, Spurge. But yeah, I think we agreed that we wanted to start with ADV or off-road rides because it's a pretty specific scenario that these happen. Obviously, there's a wide breadth of ways that you can do this, but we feel like they fall into the same category. And you, as you mentioned earlier, are fresh off a large enduro, like off-road group ride.
Sport ride, yeah. And it's funny because, Zach's hitting the, but it's complicated section. And I think it's an important note too, that a lot of what goes into the success of a group ride is how you react to it. Like we're talking a lot about like other people and what's the etiquette, but like our goal for this is, hopefully to throw out some little nugget of information that you can take away that will help you have a better experience the next time you're out in a situation where you're riding with somebody else. And, kind of starting off with the ADV off-road segment, I think for me, kind of kicking off, like, what is this good for? One of the common complaints that we hear a lot with off-road riding and people that are new to this is, I don't know where to ride. I don't know. I don't have anybody to ride with. I've heard that it's dangerous to go out and ride by yourself. And for me, especially like my background, like getting into some adventure events and some off-road rides was a way to find places to ride, was was to make friends in like the same area that I could go out and then go and do additional rides with. But then also, I think just kind of learning some of the etiquette that goes along with this. And I think that that's something that people sometimes underestimate, is like the education that comes with, showing up and going through some of these events.
Right. So, I'm curious, Spurg, if you have a lot more off-road group riding experience than I do, because you often do these events during your riding season. And I'm curious if you have any stories that stand out of you sort of going to one of these rides or being a part of a adventure or off-road ride initially and just really misreading a situation and not, like, I don't know, just kind of like not understanding how it worked, or did you think that people communicated well with you? Or there has to be, I know you must have made a mistake at some point. You must have.
No, yeah, I appreciate that. I think the biggest thing for me in the beginning was how nervous I was, right? Because riding off-road is the first time you're riding off-road, whether you're doing it on an adventure bike, if you didn't grow up on dirt bikes, and you maybe started riding on the street and then you came to dual sports or adventure bikes later on, it is intimidating, right? And I think that it's very easy to get in over your head. And I think it's very easy to get confused with navigation if you're not used to navigating, to make a wrong turn. And I think for myself, as I remember back to one of my very earliest forms of a group ride, which was actually, I was taking, there's a school in New Jersey called the Pine Barrens Adventure Camp riding school. And at the end of the class, you're allowed to go out and do a group ride. They're saying, you've done 8 hours of training. Now we're going to take you out and we're going to do like a 2-hour ride through the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. And I remember being really excited, right? And I was doing really good on all my drills and I was doing really good in all the training. And we get out there and we're an hour into this and they take us to a big kind of like a sand pit type area. And there's like a little trail that runs around the perimeter of this big pit. And they're like, okay, we're just all going to gather here and we're just going to do laps around. And there's like little hills to go over and there's off camber stuff. And I remember getting to the first little hill and I did it really well. I was like, this is good. All right, I got the hang of this. And then the guy came out to take pictures of the group ride. And I got to the hill a second time and I was like, I'm going to come up this hill a little more aggressively. And I managed to launch, I was on the Tiger 800 at the time and I launched it probably a good like 3 or 4 feet up in the air. And I remember thinking, this is going to look so cool. And then realizing that like I hadn't learned enough as to like how to bring it down. So I figured out how to go up in the air.
It's not the jumping that's so tricky. It's the landing.
It's the coming down. Right. I came down and the bike went sideways and I went flying off. And I went from feeling really good to like really,
sheepish.
Really sheepish. Like I was the only one that crashed. I was the only one that decided to try and like get aggressive and get cocky. And I think it's a good lesson for like adventure events in general, right? Like know your ability and like know what the consequences can be.
I think was there a picture? Actually, come to think of it.
I have a picture of it going up. I do not have a picture of it. I can.
You didn't save any of the ones that the photog took of you doing the flying W like over tea kettle.
They didn't. I think for probably insurance purposes on their part,
they did not send you the crashing ones.
They did not show the crashing ones in my inbox, but I do have the one of me going up.
I had a lot of fun with suggesting that you surely had made a mistake on one of your group rides. I didn't realize it was going to yield such a fun story. I'd not heard that story before, but that was a good time. Thanks, Spurg.
Yeah.
And you know what I'd like to harken back to here is this started off with nerves, right? You were like really nervous. You went there and you're like, "Whoa, I'm not really sure." And I think this is a really, really common thing in group rides to show up. And we might retread some of this later when we talk about other types of group rides. But for me, certainly, I grew up on a dirt bike, sort of like I had a dirt bike when I was a little kid and I rode around our farm when I was, 8, 10, 13 years old, whatever. But I don't know how to jump. I'm not a motocross rider. I can't do tricks. I can't really jump very well. I'm not, we all have insecurities when it comes to riding a bike in any situation, I think. And it's really easy to be nervous when you show up to especially if it's a new group of people, you're going to a school or a class or some sort of seminar, or anytime your riding skills are on display, excuse me. And I think that that's really normal. And I guess, what did you take away from your sort of like your nerves and your ambition and that whole scene, Spurge? Like, what was your takeaway in the end? Was sort of like,
yeah, I want to back up for 1 second, and hopefully our editor Matt can. I have a picture of Zach in the air with a GS 1250. So when he goes back and he's like, I can't jump very well, I'm going to show the picture of you on that track out there in the Mojave Desert with a GS 4 feet in the air. But I would say that what I learned was a little bit of hubris. Well, I think going out and riding and trying to push the boundaries is one thing, right? And that is part of what group rides are good for, because you have people around if something goes sideways or something goes pear-shaped, but also understanding what those consequences are. The consequences are you could, screw things up for the other people on the ride if they have to stop and take care of you. The consequences are you could end up having to figure out how you're going to get all your stuff home if you don't have a truck or a trailer to throw a broken bike in the back. And you're ultimately responsible for yourself. And I think as we talk through a lot of the group rides today, like that responsibility kind of comes into play. Like, with adventure events specifically, oftentimes you're out in the middle of nowhere, right? And if you're riding along and somebody in front of you is down on the ground, you're responsible to stop and check in on them. And here's what I'll say is that, like, there's probably a lot of people listening. They're like, I don't know how to change a flat tire. And so if I stop and I see somebody on the side of the trail with a flat tire, what am I going to do to help them? Maybe they don't have a cell phone. Maybe the way that you can help them is by saying, hey, do you need any help? And they say, yeah, I don't have a plug kit. I got a flat tire. And you can say, great, I can't help you, but I'll ride to the next, stop or the next checkpoint. And I'll let someone know that's a sweep rider or in charge of the event that you're stuck back on, I'll make a little mark of where you are on the route and where you are on the trail. So there's always ways you can help. And I remember my first time doing a race type event outside of a dual sport, I did the same thing. I stopped and I was like, hey, can I help you? And they're like, it's a race, man. So there's definitely a different mentality with like racing versus like dual sports. And I think that's why like dual sports or ADV events are a really way to get into it, because people are more likely to stop and to help and to be friendly. But that doesn't take away your responsibility. You should go into the event making sure you do your homework as to what's expected of you. And I think maybe we can pivot into some of that a little bit too.
Well, I guess I'd like to ask a broader question, and maybe something that's a little bit more volatile as a conversation. Would you recommend that someone do a group, like if they're like, cool, I got a dual sport, I got a Suzuki DRZ 400 or a whatever the heck, and like I just moved to this town, or I just got this bike, and like I'm like okay at riding around, I guess, but I want to ride with other people and I don't really know how to do it. And I see that there's a Pine Barren meetup, whatever. But I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. Would you recommend someone go to an event to start their sort of group riding, dual sport or ADV or off-road adventure? Or would you recommend they ride with one or two other people to begin with?
I would recommend
what would you choose?
If you move to a new town and you're not familiar with anybody, show up, ride an event, right? Like, and that's honestly, the only thing I would say is like, know your ability. And I think this is
that's what I was going to say. What if I'm not good enough? What if I can't keep up with the riders? I'm not going to be fast enough to keep up in the woods. And like, what then?
There's always in my experience, there's always going to be different levels of ability at all of these events. Right. And, for example, when we do Get on Adventure Fest, which is our RevZilla adventure event, we do like easy, intermediate, and advanced as far as like the different routes you can take. Uh-huh. If you're not sure what your ability is, go out on the first day and do an easy. You can always say, this was too easy for me, I would like to bump up. Right. But if you go out and you're like, oh, I've
more difficult to go
two routes. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, and people you don't know, and you're having to ask strangers for help. I'll give you an anecdote where, one of the things that we've started doing is on the very first day of the event, we have like a little 20-mile section. And I think you were with us 2 years ago when we started doing this, where we basically just said on riders showing up on that Thursday, let's all go out together. We're the us as in Zach and myself, we're going to hang out in this 20-mile stretch and just go do the loop a couple times. And this is an intermediate level route, right? Like it's as hard as it's going to be for intermediate. It's as easy as it's going to be for advanced. And if this is too hard for you, well, now you know in advance. Now you can go back and you can do an easy route. So there is a bit of an educational aspect to how this works, because where we learned about this was a couple years back. We were out and we ran into a rider on this hill climb, and he was adamant that he had taken rider training courses, and he took, I went to Rawhide, and I took 2 Rawhides, and I'm an intermediate rider. And he had trouble with the trail, right? And he kept falling over. And I think it's one thing to go and take a class and to label yourself something, but that doesn't, the label that you have internally for yourself is not necessarily the label that matches with the actual terrain and how difficult something is depending on the event that you're doing. So long story short, if you're going into something and you want to make new friends and you're not sure, just always start out a notch below where you think you are, and know that you can always, bump up as you go along.
What's the basic etiquette for off-road events for like, I don't want to talk about like what to pack and what to bring, because I don't want you to be like, first a sleeping bag, then whatever. But like, does you bring your own gas? Obviously, like if you're going out in the woods somewhere, you should have a refill of gas probably. But like, is it? I know you, Spurge. You're an unselfish lover, so you would bring a toolkit for other people in case you could stop and help them. I know you've done that in the past, but like, is it? How unprepared is too unprepared, and how prepared is too prepared, or something? Like what kind of what's the etiquette for like what to bring and sort of how prepared to be when you arrive?
So let's touch on the basics, right? Like let's say you have an adventure event or a dual sport ride in your area. First things first, read the emails they send you. Chances are the organizer of the event will send you an email and say, this is what the event's going to be like. This is what you need to bring. These are the things you should be aware of. First thing is, how are you navigating it, right? Are they putting up arrows? Is it a roll chart event? Which means that it's a piece of paper and you roll and it tells you mile by mile where your turn is.
Important distinctions here.
Is it a GPS navigation? So like if it's an arrowed event, because some of the events that we sponsor, we send out RevZilla arrows, and then you just go through the woods. You just follow the green arrows if you're on the green path, or the orange arrows. If it's a navigation event with GPS, you need to have a GPS, or you need to have a phone with a GPS app, or you have to have a roll chart holder. So one is how are you navigating the event and making sure that you have that ability. 2, know your machine, and at the very most, know what your fuel range is, and know how to change a flat tire. Like at bare minimum, that's what you need to know. Go ahead.
If you don't know how to change a flat tire, don't show up to the Spurgeon Dunbar off-road ride. Just don't.
All I'm saying is, there's a good chance that at some point you're going to have a flat tire at an off-road event. And if you should, I'm not asking you to be responsible for anybody else's machine, but at least know the basics of, how to get your wheel off, and then you can ask for help. So if you don't know how to change a flat tire, make sure you have the tool with you, Zach, for your Versys 650 front tire to at least pull it off.
I can't carry all the tools for all the different machines I ride. It's just not possible, especially when I'm not a good mechanic. It just doesn't. You had me covered. It was great.
So know your machine, know your fuel range, and then again, 3 is read. It goes back to like reading the rules they sent out. Is it a camping event? Is it a hotel event? Is it an overnight? Do you need meals? Like, are there meals on the trail? Do you bring some snacks? How are you feeding yourself? You're going to burn a lot of calories. That's the basics. Right. And then showing up and just not being afraid to ask questions.
What about the specifics of being on the trail? Like, suppose you're stuck behind someone, you want to get past. Like, you honk your horn, you rev, you just follow too close. I don't know.
So it's interesting. We actually had this. So the event that I was at over the weekend was an event called Dirty Dabbers in Lock Haven, Pennsylvania. And I think it's the largest dual sport in Pennsylvania. DCNR caps it at 600, and it's 150 adventure riders and 450 dual sport riders. And there's a dual sport trail and adventure trail. And then the dual sport trail also has harder options off of it. So if you're an aggressive, ADV rider, you can actually ride the dual sport trail and then just not do the options. Or if you're a dual sport rider and you want to go even more aggressive, you can scale up to that. So there's different levels you can pick. And we had someone who was on the dual sport trail on an option and passed somebody, and they got upset, and they're like, came up at the next stop and were screaming and yelling, and the etiquette.
They couldn't pass. Sorry, they were stuck behind someone.
Someone passed them. And
someone passed them.
I talked to someone who passed an individual, and when they got to the next stop, the individual came roaring up and was like, "You passed me, and you made me nervous, and I almost crashed, and how dare you?" And so, like, the rules come back to kind of what we've talked about in the past on the podcast. Like, make sure it's a clean pass. You come up behind somebody, give a few honks of the horn. You can rev your engine a few times, let them know you're there. And if you keep going and they're not getting over, you have to wait for an appropriate time to pass. And off-road riding, that can be tricky if you're not good. You need to make sure that you can clearly pass.
Right.
And so for my group, there were a couple times where we would wait until we got to like a 2-track section where like the route went from like one single trail into a little bit of a wider trail. And we were able to, typically if you're riding slower than the pack, stay over to the right. Again, easier said than done in off-road situations, because sometimes they want to ride to the left of the trail because that's where the easy section is. And so to pass, you'd have to go to the right. So I would say use your horn liberally if you're
nice. That's what I wanted to hear. Honk, honk,
Honking.
honk, honk. Have you ever been honked at, Spurg?
All the time.
Have you ever been yelled at for a pass that you made and someone was like, "Hey, that was too rough, too close"?
No, I'm usually pretty, like, if I pass people, I usually give a wide berth because I think it's important. Like, even if you're a skilled rider, like I've been doing the off-road adventure ride stuff for about 10 years at this point, and never underestimate. You go to pass somebody and all of a sudden there's a rock that you didn't see and it bounces you in a way that you weren't expecting. And if you're going to pass somebody, it is really truly up to you to make sure that you are confident in your ability to pass them. Otherwise, you're going to not just ruin your day, you're going to ruin somebody else's day, and it's going to be your fault.
Let me ask you a question about off-road riding. How often do you ride by yourself? Completely by yourself?
At, like, me personally, or at an event?
No, you personally, outside of events.
Before kids or after kids?
This is a good.
Yeah, I mean, I used to ride at least once a month by myself. If not more than that. And then there were many times a month where I'd call up a friend or some friends, and we'd meet on a Saturday morning and go out for a group ride and something like that.
Well, so I guess where I'm going with this is, I would not recommend in general people ride off-road by themselves. If you're going to be away from roads, away from civilization, away from cell phone service, away from, in general, my rule or my advice is don't do that. Is there like any caveats you'd like to add there?
I think that's a good piece of advice, especially for people that are just starting out. And I think where group rides do have a great benefit when you're looking at an adventure event, when you're looking at a dual sport event, it's really beneficial for new riders because it gives them a group of people to ask questions from. It gives them all the things that we've already talked about. It gives you the routes. It gives you the education, the information, and you get to show up and just kind of, follow along a line that somebody else has already prepared for you. It also helps you make friends so that after you do an adventure event or two, like I talked about that class that I took, I made 2 friends. One I stayed friends with, and we actually went out and did events with. We said, hey, there's the Pine Barrens 500 is coming up. You want to do it together? Hey, I'm going to go out Saturday and ride. You want to meet me, and we'll go out and ride for a couple hours. And for the first couple of times that I would say the first year and a half, 2 years, that's really how I went out. I went out with other people. And then, you start, I got a spot tracking device. You start to take some precautions to make sure that if you do go out solo, you can get yourself back out of it. So I wouldn't say that it's it's a great way to start as far as like going out and being in a group and having other people around you in case something goes wrong.
What about the negative stuff that we talked about at the front end there? Like you're open to other people's mistakes. Like you said, you can go to pass someone and they can hit a rock and swerve over and clatter into you.
Yeah,
when you're riding in a group, or you can learn bad habits and like I know you've got a very addictive personality. You must have learned some bad habits along the way somewhere.
Yeah, I think that for experienced riders, showing up to a group event means that you're going to have unexperienced riders there. And you're going to have people that might not know the rules. And so it's the flip side of everything we were just talking about. You're going to have those same pros of being able to have new rides or new routes and get to ride on some land that might be off limits otherwise. Like the ride we did this past weekend, like half the route you can't ride the other 360 odd days of the year because it's not legal.
Right.
But some of the downsides just in general are you're not alone out in the trail. There's going to be a lot of other people. There's pressure, right? Like you come to that first hill climb and it's muddy and people are just going and they're going and they're going. And you're like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And it can be intimidating. Right. And I think that's where, for all the good that comes of it, you have to know your ability. You have to know if you're in over your head and, when it's time to kind of like, pull the parachute and say, this is a bit too aggressive for me. I'm going to jump down a notch and take an easier route.
Right.
Because I think that's the biggest area where I see people get in trouble is they end up riding over their ability. And that's when they get hurt.
So we can talk about off-road group rides a little bit more later if we want to, but sure. I think this is an interesting place to segue because you're talking about like, you don't want to ride over your head. You don't want to try things you shouldn't try. You don't want to, feel pressure to ride in a way that you don't want to ride. The next type of group ride that we were going to talk about is sort of like a large gathering street ride, like distinguished gentleman ride, like a poker run you might do, a toy run like the Spurgeon mentioned earlier, where you're sort of like there's a reason for a large group of street riders to get together, regardless of the type of motorcycle that you're riding. Maybe there is no core value there. Maybe it's just like a complete mix of bikes, whatever. It's a large group of people riding on the street together for some reason. And I feel like in some ways, this is a more difficult thing to navigate because there isn't it's really more of a social occasion than it is a skill-based ride, right? Like when you go off-road riding, you're sort of there because you all want to tackle the terrain or you want to become a better rider or you want to
it's social, but it's social. It's social.
Sure.
At camp at the end of the day when you're telling your war stories and you're like,
totally.
Yeah.
Not that it's not social, but it's not social first. I don't think it's like the reason you're there is to ride bikes. A benefit of that is to hang out and do the thing.
Sure, I would agree with that
in general. But I think that one of the reasons that I personally have shied away from large group street rides is that I don't find
you're not social.
Right. I don't like talking to people.
Yeah.
But also it's just it can be a difficult thing to gauge, right? Because you're not there. You don't all necessarily have the same goal. Like we're not all trying to do that quote unquote hill climb, right? We're sort of here because of there's like a free barbecue and a concert 20 miles away. So we're all riding there together, or there's a whatever. And I think this is a situation where it's easy to get in over your head or end up in a situation that's uncomfortable or dangerous without it being quite as obvious as like, I'm going to try to tackle that hill climb. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think this is where, to my experience with this, when I first got into riding, with my little Bonneville, I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any friends, but like you'd show up at a dealership and they'd be doing like a poker run and you're like, oh, cool. I'll show up to this. And
what is a poker run anyway? Do you play poker?
I have played poker.
That wasn't my question. Jesus Christ. Do you play poker at a poker run?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking me personally if I gamble.
No, I've heard the term poker run thrown around a lot. I'll be honest, I don't even really know what it means. What does it mean? What do you do at a poker run?
A poker run is there's a series of stops. So you start at a local dealership and you ride to the first stop and they give you a playing card. You ride to the second stop, they give you a playing card. You ride to the next stop, and when you get to the end of the event, whoever has the best quote unquote hand can win prizes. So
Gotcha.
you collect like 5 or 7 cards throughout the different stops, and you got a royal flush, and they're like, oh my god, and then you win the free helmet at the end of the event or something like that. So this
wasn't, just so everyone knows, this wasn't supposed to be Spurgeon educating me on how group rides work, but it sort of turned into that. I'm realizing that I'm quite ignorant, actually, which is
it's like gamification, right? And I think for a lot of people out there, if you don't do this stuff, it's not just Zach that's, looking for the education. And Zach, you've done the off-road adventure side with me, but I think
sure.
to the, the large gathering on the street, like it's definitely something that I know that you and I, neither one of us gravitate towards, but I probably partook in it a little bit more in my younger days. And my dad and I still do a local toy run. In November, we do a Toys for Tots toy run where we throw a toy on the back of our, motorcycles, and we ride down 20 miles and drop it off because it's a way for us to meet together for a cup of coffee.
So what's the when you do a toy run, you're gathering your Toys for Tots, whatever, you're gathering up gifts for less fortunate children, whatever, and you're riding down the road surrounded by 75 other people on 75 other motorcycles. I'm trying to paint the picture here. Sure. What's the feeling that's coursing through your veins when you are in that scenario? You're sort of like, united for a common cause. And like, I'm not here to ride my bike. I'm here for something else.
Sure.
And can you talk me through that? Because this is something I've always struggled with.
I think for a lot of it, it's the social aspect. And you kind of hit on this to begin with, right? Like it's not so much we're going to go out and try to do 200 miles. It's we're going to ride, think about the poker run. So we're going to ride 15 miles to the next stop, and then we're going to stop and we're going to get off and we're going to stretch our legs and chat with people. And, hey, Kathy, it's good to see you. And let's grab a cup of coffee and a donut. And, and I think it's more of that social aspect. The same thing when you're at the Toys for Tots, whatever, or a distinguished gentleman's ride, like you meet somewhere and you're all walking around and you're looking at one another's bikes and you're admiring your distinguished gentleman's outfit. And, I'm impressed with your period authentic goggles that you found on eBay, Right. So there's some of that where it does harken back to a little bit more of the social aspect. And then when you're in that ride aspect, or when you're in the ride on the street, it is like you're in a parade. It's definitely much more of that. You need to know that if there's a rider on your left, you have to be behind them and to the right. If someone is trying to ride parallel next to you and not staggered, are you okay with that? And
I don't like that.
I don't like that either.
Okay.
And this is something that like Lance and I talked about recently, because he's at a Hornet launch, and he was talking about how when he was going through a straight section, like other riders were trying to ride alongside of him. And he's like, I don't want to do that. You get out of my lane. Like
I don't play that, homie.
I'm using my whole lane.
I like imagining Lance be like, don't get too close to me, man. I don't know you. Okay. Well, yeah, so that's fair. Social, and you're in sort of a parade. That's kind of a fun feeling, right? You might trundle through a little town and there's like a kid and his mom and he's like, well, waving to, because there's so many motorcycles, where if you ride through by yourself, you're not necessarily creating such a scene. And sometimes the police will like shut down a stoplight so you can just ride right through. Okay.
I would say some of the pros,
Toys for Tots.
Some of the pros for like new riders, like it's a great way to meet people in your riding community, right? If you don't know anybody. And one of the things that Zach and I were talking about in pre-pro for this, in pre-production, is that a lot of people, we've been partnering recently with, trying to get some new rider content out there for the Ride Again Fund, or the MSF Foundation. And like a lot of people struggle when they're getting into motorcycling with like, who do I ride with? And I think back to like when I was first starting out, like I had my dad, but he didn't have a motorcycle at the time. I had a buddy who rode a Harley, but was going through a divorce and he didn't want to go out and ride. So like I spent a lot of time riding alone. And going to these events is a way to to meet people in your local
Sure.
town. And, it's, hey, I met you at this event. Let's go out for a ride on a Saturday and stop for a cup of coffee at the diner 3 towns over. And, that's,
Right.
I think part of a benefit for this.
Let me ask you this. Do you think you, Spurgeon Dunbar, with all of your skills and good looks and vast, enormous wealth, are safer in a group ride, like on a toy run, like, safer on your motorcycle when you're surrounded by 75 other people on 75 other bikes, rolling down a 2-lane road and through a town and into a parking lot, whatever, than you are by yourself? And this is not a facetious question. I'm asking because I could go either way.
Yeah, I think you make a good. I see where you're getting at here, and I think when we talk about adventure and off road, there's inherent risk there, because if you get in over your head and you fall off a rock cliff because you don't know what you're doing, like that's obvious. Or when we get into track riding, which I know is your specialty here in a minute, you're going high speed, high risk, and there's issues here. I think a lot of people look at something like a poker run or a DGR run, and they're like, it's low speed. You're going 45 miles an hour on the highway, and
sure.
it's lower risk. And I think typically it's not high speed, it's not high risk, but you are really vulnerable to other people not knowing the proper etiquette, not knowing what to happen, what to do at a 4-way stop, or not knowing how to stagger, or somebody turns into your lane and you're not expecting it. So I think it can be more dangerous if you're very new at it and you're not up on feeling comfortable with people around you, because it invariably, you're going to have
do people typically
around
ride
you.
close to each other when these kind of things in your poker runs, your Toys
in
for
my
Tots?
Experience, yes. I mean,
it's like pretty clustered together.
People want to be close, and like if one person goes down in front of you, like there was you're
going to have like a Tour de France situation where like 55 bicyclists go down because one guy got a flat tire.
I'll give you an example. I had a friend who was leading an on-road adventure event, right? It was not off-road. It was like just they're going around the road.
Yep.
And one of the riders, they came to a stop sign, and the whole parade kind of came to a staggered stop. And the first rider started to go and was pulling out at an intersection and realized that a car was coming. So they kind of applied the brake and stopped and waited for the car to go. Well, the person behind them wasn't looking to see if a car was coming. They were just looking down
at the person in front of them.
They saw the person in front of them started to go.
Right.
So they started to go. And when the other person stopped, they were already looking through the corner, and they ran into them, and then they both crashed. So like, it's a situation where like they were going less than 5 miles an hour.
Right.
But because someone was accelerating into a parked motorcycle, they got hurt and they did some damage to their bike, and the ambulance had to come. And so I think in this situation, it's really important to, even though it's low speed and it seems, innocent enough, you have to always be on, and you have to know your surroundings. Do not assume that the other person is going to do something. Anticipate that they are going to do the last thing that you expect, and you have to be constantly on. And I think that's, to me, that's one of the reasons that I'm not a huge fan of this. Like when I go out to ride, I know my ability. I know where I want to be, and I know how fast I want to go. I know when I want to stop. I know when I want to use the bathroom. So like, unless it's like you and I going out for a ride on a Saturday, or my dad and I, or my buddy Jeff and I, like there's very rarely am I looking to go out and be with 175 people outside of the couple times a year where it's like a fun social aspect of it.
Sure. Okay, fair enough. Well, I mean, for my personal taste, I feel confident on a motorcycle. I'm fluent in operating the machine, blah, blah, blah. I feel pretty confident riding in any scenario, any normal scenario, and being aware of traffic and being able to control my machine and blah, 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 and being quote unquote safe. But I will say there's when you ride in groups like that, I do feel like you're sort of more visible to cars, and you have like, there is some safety in numbers. But I do think it's a good PSA that you gotta be vigilant. Just because you're like surrounded by other motorcyclists and you think that you're all on the same page, human beings are not. Right?
Have you ever? I know that we're talking a lot about, my experience here. Have you ever done anything like this? I mean, I know that you've done like press launches, obviously, where you're
right. We do this a lot because you're riding with 10
right.
other people on the same bike in the same roads in Spain or Oregon or whatever. Yeah.
And I know that you've done, a lot of the adventure and dual sport stuff that we talked about earlier, but like, have you ever done, like a poker run or
I've never done a poker run, Spurge. You had to tell me what the whole card. I didn't understand what the cards meant.
But have you showed up? Have you done like a DG, like a distinguished gentleman's ride, or have you done any of that
distinguished.
Stuff?
No.
I know, but you play one on TV. You play a distinguished gentleman.
That's true.
On YouTube.
That is true. No, I remember the last group ride I remember doing was years and years ago. And it was part of a media thing. It was Ducati or I'm not going to throw them under the bus. I think it was a Ducati thing. It was like a event that Ducati hosted, and it wasn't a press launch. It wasn't a launch for a new bike. It was like a thing where it was like, there's going to be a concert, and like free food, and everyone's going to meet at this one place, and then we're going to ride to this other place where the stuff's going to be. And I went because I think I was like trading out a bike. I had one Ducati and I was trading out another Ducati, and they're like, oh, you just meet us this event and you can do the thing if you want to. And I was like, yeah, cool. Right. That's easy enough. I can do the ride thing. And, so it was just a big group of people, maybe 100 bikes or 50 bikes. I don't know how many bikes, a lot, but more than I could count. And we rode up a twisty road to a place. And I remember looking around at all the different ways that people were riding. There were like people on cruisers that were just kind of chugging along. And then there were like a couple guys that were like, not even on really sport bikes, but like, sporty-ish bikes. And they were like passing everybody. Like they were trying to get to like the front of the group. So they were like going around outside of people in corners and like, and then crossing the yellow line and like shooting past people on straightaways and stuff. And then there were people that had like, Honda Goldwings with like the little stuffed peanut M&M on the back. And like, I guess what I remember thinking is like,
this is madness.
Everyone's skill. I didn't like it. I'll say that. Yeah. I did not like it personally. And I remember thinking that everyone's vision for what this ride is different, and their skills are different, and their bikes are different, and what they were expecting is different. And that's creating this real like chaos effect of kind of like weird overlapping emotions and skill sets and speeds and physics and emotions and whatever. And so I didn't really like it. I
would say that's a great.
I think
no, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say all the things we've talked about up to this point are still valid. Like you do. I probably had some good conversations with people that day, or saw a cool bike that I hadn't seen before, or something like that. There are positives to take away from it, but the actual, because I felt myself not like I felt the reason for the group ride not resonating with me as a whole. I just felt out of place, and I didn't think I wanted to be there. But again, that's me.
I think it's a good note. Like for the majority of adventure or off-road events that I've shown up to, they're very well organized. For the majority of track days that I show up to, they're very well organized. For a lot of these on-road large gathering rides, it is hit or miss because they're usually organized by an individual dealer or a smaller organization. And sometimes they have done it for 30 years in a row and they really have it dialed in. Other times it's like, oh, we're going to try this for the first time, or we're going to host our own DGR from this location. And it can be a little bit unnerving. So I would say that, like, as you're thinking about things, if you're a new rider listening to this podcast and you're thinking about things to be aware of for large gatherings or rides, like the potential confusion is one that I had listed on my piece of paper. It can be disorganized if not run correctly. And also this would be a great call out for, we'll put the URL up on screen. We'll put a description link. Producer Chase found a group riding page on the MSF's website. And this is a great time to reference that. The Motorcycle Safety Foundation has a great introductory page
Indeed.
About going to do like your first group street ride like this. And I think it carries over into, just some great points that will hold true for all types of group riding.
I agree. And we're not going to go through this whole list because this is sort of like referential, and we're supposed to be having more fun here. But it is a great quick guide. It's called Guide to Group Riding. It's at the msfusa.org site. If you Google it, I'm sure you'll find it. But one of the things, I'm just going to point out one thing. I loved that the very first thing that is listed here is arrive on time with a full gas tank. Spurge, how many times at Get On Adventure Fest when we're sort of like, all right, cool, there's like, we're going to go do this advanced route, or we're going to go do this intermediate route or whatever. And we're like, going to go out and ride. So cool. You're going to come, John, Steve, Cindy, Bill, you're all going to come with us. Okay, cool. Right on. Yeah. We're going to leave in like 10 minutes. No sweat. And then inevitably we set off and someone's like, oh, my gas light's on. And then everyone's like, what the
For those of you listening, my eyes were closed and my head was shaking because like it's without fail, right? Like it's without fail. And you're sitting there, it's 100 degrees and we're all ready to go. And do you have like, I'm going to run to the gas station real quick. I'll be right back. And it's like, you're no longer riding with us. Like,
exactly. You're off the island. Yeah, you're voted off. Yeah. That's it. You're cut from the team.
But it's one of those ones where like, as Zach and I talked about in the beginning, there's certain carryovers that whether you're talking about dual sport rides or large gathering street rides, or we're going to get into track days in a second. Like you don't go out to a session on track with an empty tank of gas, right? Like show up knowing your machine, make sure you have gas in the tank, make sure you get your snacks, make sure you've used the bathroom. Right. And I think that's probably a great place. Is there anything else for like large gatherings that you want to hit on before we pivot and get a quick little motul add in here?
Have an open mind. That's all I would say. You can't go in with too many expectations of exactly what it's going to be when you go to a large street ride, whether it's a DGR, a poker run, Toys for Tots, whatever it is. Don't expect it to be anything other than what it is. And if you don't know what it is, go there to learn. Don't go there to like make an impression. That's what I'd say.
I think it's a good way of putting it. All right. Well, hopefully that gives you a good general idea of large gathering and rides. I think, what I would ask as we pivot into a motul out here is, as you're listening to this episode, we would love to hear some of your feedback and responses. What are some group rides that you've done? What are some things that have happened to you that you liked and that you disliked? And maybe we'll have a little follow-up from our audience. We're going to come back. We're going to hit track day experience as far as group rides. But for now, let's get into a word from our sponsor, Motul. All right, we are back from Motul. I actually spent yesterday with a couple of cans of trusty Motul as I was cleaning.
That you did. You cleaning up after your off-road group ride.
Got full of mud, had to pull out my Motul cleaning products. So we want to transition into to track days. Track days are a form of group riding. It's a great way to meet like-minded riders. Zach and I were talking during the break that there's actually probably more parallels to track days, to ADV rides and dual sports than there are to, a poker run per se. But Zach, you're somebody that spent a lot of time on a racetrack. First and foremost, do you have any fun stories about helping out a new rider at a racetrack? Maybe somebody you that showed up and didn't really know what they're doing. Do you have any good Samaritan anecdotes you'd like to share?
I've got a fun one. This doesn't really have anything to do with any of the things you just said, except I did stop to help someone one time. I was racing. I was a teenager at the time. I was racing a Honda RS 125 two-stroke GP bike, customer GP bike, and I was racing at Mossport, otherwise known as Canadian Tire Motorsport Park or something now, I forget. Anyway, famous old track. They had Grand Prix races way back when, the 60s and stuff there. I was at a vintage event, but I was racing this modern 125. And first lap, they started the 125 modern bikes behind this raft of vintage bikes, which first of all, bad call. That doesn't have anything to do with great group rides. But we go away from the start and I'm like kind of picking my way through the vintage bikes because I'm on a faster, more capable machine. So it was a gridding issue, really. Anyway, I come steaming down into Moss's hairpin at the very bottom of the circuit, and I make slight lapse of judgment. I tried to pass one too many people, perhaps, and I bumped into this guy right at the middle of the corner, and he went off the track somehow, in some way or shape or form.
You literally bumped. It was not a metaphor.
I knocked him down. Yeah, I knocked him down. Yeah. And I saw him crash, and and this is a race, mind you. We got a green flag, and we're racing. Everyone is racing to the checkered flag to try to win, just to clear things up, so there's no ambiguity. I pulled off the side of the track and leaned my bike against the tire wall. And I walked back and I was like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I just like went to check on him. And if you've done any motorcycle racing or any kind of racing or competition, you might be thinking that's a crazy thing to do. And so I guess, use this opportunity. I hope that you are laughing to yourself or out loud right now, thinking about me going back and being like, "Hey, buddy, sorry about that. Are you all right?" And he was not receptive to my apology. He was not interested in. It was too fiery a moment. And this is a good lesson. If you do have some sort of coming together, and you feel bad about it, that's okay. But that's not the time to stop on the racetrack. And I'm not gonna. You should never stop on a racetrack unless the marshals very specifically tell you to do that. Because sometimes, to bring it back around, they do that in Canada. The point is, I'm not going to go through all the etiquette of going to track days and like you should tape your lights and take your kickstand off and make sure that you have lots of water. Whatever. You should know. There's probably more videos on the internet about how to do that. And also, there should be clear and concise communication from the track day organizer. But on the topic of group rides, Spurge brought up track days in the lead up to this podcast. And I thought, track day is not a group ride. And then Spurge said, "Well, you're riding around in a group with people that you might know, you might not know." And
great way to meet people like-minded.
Right. You're there to meet people that are like-minded. I do think, to Spurge's point, this has more of a tie-in to the sort of like off-road events, because I think you're more likely. This is one of the reasons that I like the sort of off-road riding events or track day as a group ride, a quote unquote group ride event, because I think everyone's there with a purpose, right? Like theoretically, you would go do this thing by yourself. You would go and ride around the track to try to become a better rider, to try to go as fast as possible, to try to get your jollies in one way or another. And, or do that hill climb that Spurge was talking about in an off-road sense. And for that reason, I think you're more likely to meet people that are like-minded, because you're at this place where you're doing kind of a pointed, specific thing, you know? And maybe that's one of the reasons this resonated more with me. You know, I complained about the whole group ride thing, about like some people were there for one reason, some people were there for another reason. I haven't found a lot of like confusion at track days about why you're there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think I like that aspect of it.
100%. And I think I want to back up for a second, because we jumped into
you
track
always
days.
Want to back up.
We jumped into
go
track
too
days,
fast,
and I said,
I
said, "Can you tell us an anecdote about how you interact with somebody at track day?" And you jumped into, you were racing and you rode somebody off the road and then you pulled over, which are all things you should not do at your first track day. Or Zach kind of brought it back around a little bit about like, "Hey, don't pull over and stop.
Do as I say, not as I do." Yeah, exactly right.
So as far as do as I say, not as I do, one of my favorite track day anecdotes is, if you've never done track day before I dive into this anecdote, we have an article on RevZilla called Uncommon Tread. Says it's titled "How to Attend Your First Motorcycle Track Day." There's a video. Lance, myself, Alessandra, who used to work here, we went out, we did a track day, and we walked you through all the basics. So if you have no idea, if you have no idea what we're talking about, that's a great one to check out.
Sure.
I know Zach and Ari have a video coming out about mini moto and how to go to a track and do a ride very affordably. So we have some of this content that walks you through it.
Get to your fun anecdote already. I want to have a good time.
I'm saying that for people that want that information, we have it there for you. Oftentimes when you go to a track day, your first session or your last session is where the accidents happen, because you get there in the morning and you're really
kinda
excited.
Like skiing. Yeah,
and you're like, "I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do all the things at one time." And the track is cold and you haven't been on a track in 6 months, and you got to warm up a little bit. And at the end of the day, that's where you're tired. You're already 6 sessions in, and like you just want to go out one last time, and maybe you make a simple mistake. First session of the day, I did what I tell everybody not to do. I went out. I had a Ninja 400 that we just finished prepping for track, and I was excited. And I did not let my tires warm up. And I went around the very first lap, and I made it about a quarter of a way around the track. And I was at NJMP. I was at Thunderbolt, which is this. There's two actual racetracks at New Jersey.
It doesn't matter how many racetracks are at New Jersey. It doesn't matter.
Went through a chicane, lost the front end, tumbled the bike, and it's all because I was too excited. I didn't follow my own rules. I didn't let the tires warm up. And I remember I was there with Brandon Wise at the time, who used to host videos here. He still works here, just in a different capacity. And he goes, yeah, I saw your bike being brought in on the trailer of shame. And I was like, there's no way. I thought you were playing a joke on me. And then they made me ride back in the ambulance, and I had to hop out of the ambulance and I wasn't hurt, but they make, the ambulance comes out on the track and they pick you up, and
I see. Gotcha.
I had to walk back that way. So, it's a really easy way to
Too excited.
Too excited. Yeah.
This actually brings up a funny video clip I remember seeing years ago about someone. They were at a track day, and it was on board. People love to put a camera on their motorcycle and record their track day. I'm not above this. And it was from the front of a motorcycle, and this guy or gal was riding out to the track, through the paddock and out toward the track, and they're behind this guy on a Ducati, and it still has the rear tire warmer on. The rear tire warmer is still on the tire, and he rides out to pit lane and then gets on the throttle to go down pit lane and almost high-sides himself at 5 miles an hour because he has fabric on his tire instead of tire. So those are both good stories, I think, to remind you that it is being at the track or at a sort of off-road riding event or whatever. It's very easy to get excited and sort of caught up in the moment and not follow enough of a process because you're very hyped up to be doing this thing, right? Maybe you spent weeks saving for this. Maybe you're finally using your new trailer that you bought and you drove out there and you took the day off work and you got up early and you lined up a dog sitter and you did all these things, right? You did so much, you do all this work just to get to this place and just to go out there and ride around for 15 minutes at a time and have fun. And it can be really easy to lose focus.
But here's what
go ahead.
There's some things I would say there's some things that I like about this, right? So Getting back into how we broke down the first couple categories, if you've never been to a track day and you're I don't know, yes, it can be intimidating. Showing up and having to go through tech inspection and having to have your bike looked at and having to figure out how it all works. That piece, you can go ahead, you can read the article, you can watch the video, and it will help alleviate some of that. But what I like about track days is that you can show up and you can say, I'm in the beginner group. And you're with people that are of your same ability. You can ask, in a lot of track organizations, you can ask for a rider coach, and maybe it's an extra 30 or 40 bucks, but they give you somebody that's going to give you pointers and walk you through the process. All the track days that I've ever attended, the organization, when you show up, the people that are hosting the track day, they want you to enjoy yourself. They want to make sure you're having a good time. They want to answer your questions. So when we talk about the off-roads or the street rides, there's navigation, you're going to go somewhere, you're going to have to figure that out. You don't have to worry about any of that. You're going to show up at the racetrack and you're just going to go around the same circuit over and over again all day long. And you've got all day to figure it out. And after your 15-minute section, you got a 45-minute break and you get to decompress and you get to think about, what you did right, what you did wrong. And you get to talk to a coach, you get to talk to somebody else out there. And that's where you can start to make the friendships, right? That's where it's hey man, I noticed that you were on the line. I love your Ducati, Zach. You strike me as a fancy Italian loving motorcyclist. How did you do on the last session? How long have you been doing this? And it makes it for a really easy way to meet up and have some conversations.
So one thing on the topic of this being a group ride that I think is important to iterate is that it's easy to go along with what you see people doing. And that's sort of where I was going with the whole, getting caught up in the moment, right? Forgetting to put on your gloves, forgetting to take off your tire warmer, forgetting to put gas in your bike, whatever, because you're sort of oh, it's my time to go out and I'm doing the thing. There's usually good instruction for what you should be doing and what you should not be doing, what the flags mean that they'll wave to tell you what's going on the track, what they do not mean, when lunch break is, when it's not. The thing that this is actually pretty universal for any group ride, come to think of it, that we're talking about. It is always dangerous to shut off your brain and just say oh, I'm just going to go, I'm here doing the thing. And oh, I see those two guys going out on the track now and they were in my group before. So I guess I'll just go now too, because I don't know. It seems like I should be. No, have your own ducks in a row and know what you're doing. And know where you're supposed to be and where you're not supposed to be, because it's so easy to get kind of caught up in this sort of herd mentality or kind of group think and be like, oh yeah, I don't know. I'm just like going along with like those two guys are pulling off the track and tipping their bikes over. So maybe I'll do that. You don't want to be a lemming in these situations because it's important to have like independence in your own kind of like thought and mission when you're on a racetrack, especially, but in any group ride. And then enjoy the group aspect of it later. And maybe that's kind of like a good synopsis of motorcycling in general, right, Spurge? Because we're all doing it. In fact, the MSF page says, I think the very first line is motorcycling is primarily a solo activity, but for many, riding as a group is the epitome of motorcycling experience. So yeah, great. We love sharing that with other people, right? But it is ultimately a thing that you are doing alone on your machine. And I think that's like an important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, it gets back into what we kicked off talking about with even some of the off-road side. It's like it's personal accountability, knowing your own level, knowing your own machine, knowing what you want to get out of the experience, and taking accountability for yourself. Right. So, if you know that the rules are you have a 15-minute session, people the two guys or girls in front of you that are pulling off might just be tired and they're just going to pull off halfway through. So like, as long as you're not seeing a red flag, you can keep going around the track, knowing what the rules are for the group you're in. If you're in a beginner group, knowing if you are not allowed to pass, knowing where you're allowed to pass, knowing if it's, if you're want to bump up to a faster group, like what are the things that you have to do for that organization to bump up to the next group?
Spurge,
these are all things that you can ask the people there.
I got a question. What if I'm not fast? I've never been to a track day before. I'm not fast enough. I'm not going to be able to go fast enough.
Oh,
I'm just
doesn't sound like the Zach course that I know.
Well, no, this isn't.
This is a hypothetical.
Me personally.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Okay. I'm following you. Yeah. What if you're not good?
The answer to that is that there's always a group for everyone. I'll take Spurge's line here. There should be no pressure at a track day. I think it's easy to go to an off-road ride and be like, oh shoot, I'm not going to be a good enough rider. Like if I went to Dirty Dabbers with Spurge, I'd probably be thinking that. I'd be like, I don't know. Like I've ridden with Spurge before. I should be able to keep up with him, but like this is home turf and like I've never ridden this bike before and I don't know. And it's really easy to think that. But one of the things I really like about track days specifically, like a road racing track day, is that there should be no situation, provided the group is open to everyone, the track day is open to everyone, in which you are either too slow or too fast or anything. There's never a situation where that's the case. Like don't ever worry that you're going to be too fast. You almost certainly will not be, or that you're too slow, because you just won't be. It's like, that's the whole point, which I think is cool. I like that.
And that's what I was kind of hitting on with like the different groups, right? Like you're not going to show up and get put in the same class as Zach Quartz. Like you're not. Like if you've never done this before, like you're going to show up and you're going to start off in the beginner class. And then they have like, I know when I go to the track days locally, the organization that I normally go to is Evolve GT, and like they have like a sub beginner class. So like if you've never done if you've never done a track day before, like you actually go into a class where they teach you how to do a track day, and they get you out in the track. And it's not like if I've been to 3 or 4 track days, I can show up and just say, I'm a beginner rider. They put me in the A group or the C group, and I can just go out and do my thing. But if you show up and you've never done a track day before, they'll give you special instruction and they'll walk you through all the basics. So like to Zach's point, there really is no level, too low. Everybody's done this for the first time at one point in time. And I think
indeed,
whether we're talking about Dirty Dabbers and dual sports, we're talking about poker runs and distinguished gentleman rides, we're talking about track days, everybody's done it for the first time before, right? Like everybody there has had their first time doing something, and it is nerve-wracking and scary. And I think this kind of transitions us a little bit into, I don't want to jump all the way down to like, how do you find a group, but like maybe some of the transition into like riding with friends versus strangers. Like the piece that I'm trying to drive home here is that, you're going to have to be a little bit outgoing to get good at this, right? Like you're going to have to be able to raise your hand and ask a question. You're going to have to be able to say, I'm not comfortable. Like whether it's your first time at a track day or your first time at a dual sport or your first time showing up and not knowing anybody to poker run, you're going to have to be okay stepping outside your comfort zone a little bit and saying, hey, I'm Zach. It's nice to meet you. Like, I've never done a track day before, and I'm here to learn. I'm open-minded, and I'm willing to follow the rules as you give them to me. And like, to your point, I want to be present in the moment, but it is going to require you to step outside of your comfort zone a little bit. In order to, kind of bring it back around to advice that applies to all different types of rides, as you were sort of talking about, Spurge, I think a key thing when I think about something that is universal across any kind of group ride is that you need to understand that your brain waves are not the same as other people's brain waves. There's whether you're trundling down the street together or you're off-road, if you think someone's thinking something you don't really know, and the sort of like caution and wherewithal that you need to remember that and make that a part of your own personal sort of riding etiquette is super important. Have you ever, Spurge, clattered into someone at the track? You ever had someone hit you at a track day, or you ran into someone? Probably not. You're too nice a guy. No, I've never done that.
Well, I'll take this one then.
Please do.
I one time was at track day. We got checkered flag for the session. So session's over technically, but at track days, like checkered flag doesn't mean the race is over, it just means the session's over. So you can use the last part of the lap to like go as fast as you want if you want to. But I chose to take it as sort of like, I'm cooling down a little bit. And so there's one particular straightaway, and I did a big wheelie down the straightaway because I was on a bike that was good at wheelies, and I thought that might be fun. And I got to the end of the straightaway, and I put the wheelie down, and I tipped into the corner. And when I did that, someone hit me from behind and then crashed by hitting me and went off into the gittleweeds.
Did you crash or did they crash?
I did not crash. They hit the back of me and crashed. Later ended up having a perfectly civil conversation with this person. But I bring this up because I didn't really do anything wrong. Like the wheelie was not against the rules.
You never do. I don't care what they say.
Right. I was sort of acting on sort of like what I thought, like I'm there to have fun. Like the wheelie isn't against the rules. I'm not riding super erratically. I'm still on the racing line more or less. I'm just like going slower than I would have been in the rest of the session because I'm goofing off a little bit. The guy behind me didn't know that. He didn't know. He just like saw me go into the corner and he was like, oh, I don't know. I guess I'll just like pass that guy because he's goofing off. And then I went faster than he expected or brake later than he expected. Then he hit the back of me. And the point is I was doing something unpredictable from his perspective. So you could blame him for not giving me a wider berth, being like, I don't know what that guy's doing. He's like doing wheelies and stuff. So I'm going to stay away from him. That's arguably what he should have done. I arguably shouldn't have been like doing wheelies unless I was really sure that there was no one around me, because then I'm just doing something erratic. And I think that's a perfect example of like, neither one of us had any reason to fall off. Like we didn't have any reason to come together. We didn't have any reason to run into each other, whatever. We were just like on different wavelengths, and we were neither one of us was quote unquote doing anything wrong, and something went wrong. And I think that's like I don't know. I'm just putting that out there. It's like an important thing to remember.
That's a great point. It's a great point for all types of group rides, whether you're off-road or on-road or on a track. You have to expect the unexpected. You're no longer just out by yourself, responsible for, you and your behavior. You have to be able to anticipate and react. And depending on your riding ability, you're going to have to give yourself more room, you're going to have to slow down, and you're going to have to be accountable for that. The one thing I'll say, wrapping up track rides, and then we can move on, is you get out of it. And this isn't his track. Maybe we're now transitioning into riding with friends versus strangers, or making strangers friends. And this gets back into, you're going to have to step outside your comfort zone. If you're going to do a track day, or you're going to do a dual sport event, or you're going to a poker run to make friends and make new riding buddies, and you get to the end of the day and you don't talk to anyone, you're not leaving there with new friends, right? Like part of what I love about going to a track day is as it winds down at the end of the night, there's people, cooking on the grill or walking around the pit, and everybody's like talking to one another. You're checking out each other's bikes. It's easy to strike up a conversation and do that. Same thing with dual sports. Like I love riding all day, but then I also love cracking a beer back at camp and just shooting about how the day went, what your biggest crash was, or what the gnarliest mud section was. And like, it's an easy way to have those conversations and interact. And it's a great way to make friends out of strangers at these events and take away something more than just a great day of riding.
Well, on the topic of miscommunicating with people, as I was talking about earlier with the, that guy, I didn't know what I was doing, so we ran into each other. Do you think that riding with friends solves that, Spurge? If someone said, oh, if you're going riding with friends, then you're all going to be on the same page because you know each other and you know what you're doing. So you're not going to have any miscommunications.
I think riding with friends at times is probably harder than riding with strangers.
Talk about that. Why is that? Why would you say that?
Because
I'm surprised because I feel like the opposite maybe.
I think so. I ride with a group of friends that I've been riding with for probably 7 or 8 years, and we know each other. But when you're
talking about off-road riding, right?
I'm about off-road riding in general.
Sure,
but these are the same guys that I would hop you on the street with, or the same guys that we'd take a road trip together. Guys and girls. But it takes a while to get there, and we still have instances where someone shows up that has ridden with us in the past, and they haven't ridden with us in a while. And they get upset. It's like, oh, well, you went too fast in this section and I couldn't keep up. And it's like, well, we waited for you at the next stop. And you can join back in. I think the one anecdote that I'd like to share was we were riding with a group of people that we all knew each other's ability, and it was at an adventure event, and we were trying to be welcoming, and we let someone come and ride with us. And that particular individual didn't know the basic rules of the road. And after
this is a quote unquote stranger.
Quote unquote stranger.
Copy.
Yes. The stranger coming into the group. And we were trying to give them somebody to ride with.
Gotcha.
And we stopped at the first stop and we said, hey man, you're kind of all over the place. You're riding in the wrong lane. You're riding into oncoming traffic. You're making people feel uncomfortable. Let's tone it. Let's tone it down a notch. And just kind of, follow the rules of the road. And within the first 20 minutes after that, they kept making the same mistakes. They almost got hit by a car. They were just not paying attention. And we finally said, you can't continue to ride in our group. You're not, and I think I've talked about this before on the podcast.
They got banned?
Yeah, we kicked them out. It was you're not banned. Listening, and you're not being safe. And in that case, inviting the stranger to ride with a group of friends was causing problems amongst the friend group. And we had another 100 miles to go. We weren't going to keep, putting up with it. So I think if you are going to choose to ride with strangers, and they're willing to invite you in and give you pointers and give you tips, you have to kind of listen, right? If somebody came to you at a track day and you took them under your wing and you're like, hey man, you can't just leave the track without putting your hand up, or, and they just keep doing it. It's cool. I'm not going to hang out with you, and we're not going to be friends after this.
So on the surface of it sounds harsh. Someone's like, I'm going to join this cool group of people that rides with Spurgeon Dunbar. And then Spurgeon Dunbar and his friends are like, you're off the island. You suck at this. But I actually think that is kind of endearing or positive overall, because that's what you need. One of the things we talked about as a broad scale pro to group rides is finding like-minded people. And if ultimately you're riding people that you like the same type of riding, but you don't like to do it in the same way or at the same speed or whatever, then you're not really on the same page, you're not on the same wavelength. And I think it was a very mature thing to do, just be like, excuse me, kind sir or madam, we would prefer if you did not ride with us, because, and that's just that's good communication. I think you did the right thing.
I think it gets back to the original question you asked, which I don't really think I answered, about which is better, riding with friends or riding with strangers. I think my group of friends is so fine-tuned at this point that we know each other. And if we bring people in, we try to communicate the rules. We try to wait for people. We try to make them feel invited.
Right.
We had, our editor, Matt, who is editing this podcast, rode with us at Dirty Dabbers for the first time this weekend.
Right. I saw the group photo. Yeah.
And I'll call Matt out. We got to the lunch stop and Matt decided to leave. He jumped off the ride, and Matt's significant other was there and had gotten a ride over to the lunch spot with the group organizer. Well, when Matt left, he went back to camp, got his truck, came back, picked up his significant other and left. And they went to the hotel and they, recovered and got some sleep and some pizza, but they never told anybody that they were leaving. And so the group organizer was frantically calling myself and Pat McHugh saying, hey, this woman that we brought over to the lunch spot is gone. And she's
in the woods somewhere now.
Maybe she went for a hike and we don't know where she is and we don't want to leave her here because we have to go back to the other camp. So like, I think it was one of those ones where, I didn't explicitly think to say, hey, by the way, communicate if you're leaving, but there's that aspect of bringing strangers into the mix too. And now Matt, who's going to edit this down, is hearing for the first time that we got some frantic phone calls about him. And
perhaps this whole section will get cut. Well, on the topic of riding with friends versus strangers, I think I am not known for very many things, but probably best known for riding around with our friend Ari. Mm-hmm. And I've spent a lot of time riding motorcycles with Harry on and off camera. And when I think about like the number of altercations not altercations, but like,
fist fights.
Fortunately, no. The number of sort of miscommunications and I guess sort of like, small incidents that have happened riding with groups of people. I probably have had as many with him as I've had with anyone. And I think that goes to show that it's like the number of miles you ride with someone, the more you are around other people on a motorcycle, the more likely you are to miscommunicate with them and make some sort of mistake and like almost rear end them and end up in a ditch, which I've done, or like run into each other on a racetrack and bend a front brake lever, which we've done to each other, or be pedaling bicycles, not even riding motorcycles for crying out loud, but like one person decides to return left and the other person didn't know. And then we clatter into each other and we end up on the sidewalk. And I just think that he and I he is probably like my best riding friend. Right. And we spent so much time together and we are very much on the same wavelength. Like we can go on a long street ride together and we stop at the same time. We want to get gas at the same time. We don't have to communicate about so many things. We're like same wavelength. Yeah. But none of that replaces this over communication idea, the idea that you just need to be clear about what you're doing and what you're not doing.
Well, especially as you're starting out. And I think that gets back to the friend thing. And I think, while you have a long history with Ari and I have a long history with, my Carlos and my Jeff, and we can be intuitive. And, I think that for people listening to this, if you're jumping in and you have 2 or 3 friends that all have motorcycles and you're thinking, hey, let's go out for a Saturday morning ride and we're going to ride to that cafe 2 towns over and grab, a breakfast sandwich. Get your guidelines out. Sit down and say, listen, like we're not going to stop for gas until we get there. We're going to, if you have to use the bathroom, I want you to raise your left hand in the air 3 times. Are we riding with comm systems? Are we not riding with comm systems?
Oh,
like just knowing the ability of the people you're riding with, having some of those guidelines you spelled out in advance, because you just don't know if people are coming together and you're riding together for the first time, it can cause consternation. And we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but like it does not hurt to over communicate that because on a motorcycle, even if you're best friends in real life, if you've never ridden together, you're strangers. You're strangers in that relationship until you've done it.
The two-wheeled relationship. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Well, surprise, surprise, the hosts of a 2-hour podcast would tell you that over communication is key. But I want to go back and touch on one thing. Comm systems, headsets where you could Bluetooth talk to each other. Are you pro or are you anti?
I'm neither. I think they have their place, Okay. For typically with my group of people, at least for the off-road stuff, we're not using comm systems. We just communicate by, keeping an eye on the other person or raising a hand or, doing some hand signal stuff. We're stopping enough that we're not really worried about that. And then for the street stuff, I think it's great. If you're riding with a group of people, I think it can, I think it can go both ways. I think it can lead to distractions if people are over communicating and talking too much and rambling and they're not paying attention to what they're doing. I think that comm systems have a place but I don't necessarily know if I would want to be on comms with people if I was doing a first group ride with them.
Yes.
As weird as that might sound. No,
that's a great way to put it. Years ago, there was a Seinfeld episode where there's this joke about like, Keith Hernandez, the baseball player, asked him to help him move. And they were like, how you can't, like, that's a big step in a relationship to help someone move. Yeah. You can't just like jump in and help someone move. That's like kind of how I feel about comm units on, like jumping on a headset with someone that I like never ridden with before. I'd be like, no way, man. Yeah. I think if you're anti-headset, you should open your mind a little bit, because I've watched people be convinced by headsets and it really open up a new chapter in their motorcycling life. I've also been the person who was about to take a group ride with someone who was like, actually Ari and I were riding and someone was like, hey, can I join I'm going that way too. Can I ride with you? And we're like, yeah, no problem. And like, hey, we should link up our headsets. And Ari and I were in private. We were kind of like, oh my God, I'm not going to we can't let this is going to be a disaster. And then it turned out to be, no, it was great. It turned out to be great. And for some reason, some aspect of that person's personality or habits or whatever, we were just kind of like, oh, I can't believe we're doing this. And then it turned out to be great. So I've been a naysayer too in certain situations about like, I don't think that's going to work. And then it turned out to be great. But I think it's like I feel like I sound like a very conservative mother, like with a daughter going on dates. Like you hang out with them first for a little bit before you let them do anything. And that's how I feel about comm systems. It's like, don't you let them steal get third. To know them first. Don't just jump in on Bluetooth. Oh my goodness.
Now we're turning this into a dating podcast. So, all right. Friends versus strangers. I think that some of the best times that I've ever had is being out on a motorcycle with my friends and riding with them. But it does require an extra level of communication and kind of making sure that you're all on the same guidelines. And then there's times where I've ridden with strangers and it's gone really well and it's gone really badly. Like, I don't think there's no right or wrong to this.
There's no calculus. Agreed. Yeah. No, you can't. Yeah.
There's a event called the Icebreaker Dual Sport, which is like, it's the first dual sport on the East Coast here. It happens in February. And we met a young man who was there and did not have anybody to ride with. And, we were shooting the proverbial, and he was like, oh, do you mind if I tag along? And we're like, sure, you can come along. Great day. He rode like a professional. He was I couldn't lose him. He was on my tail the whole time. But wasn't overriding his ability.
Right.
Was fun to talk to at stops. And if you've ever seen my Sally the Rally, my 890, there's a little picture of a flying pig. And he actually developed this little sticker in like the metaphor for adventure bikes. And it was a pig with wings and like a motorcycle. Right, and so that's the little sticker that's on my Adventure Rally. And then he ended up coming out to get on Adventure Fest in South Dakota 2 years ago. So we you never know.
Strangers becoming
you never
friends. Know. Look at you go.
100%.
Well, yeah, I think I've told you, I don't remember if I've told this on the podcast before. We're getting pretty deep into this whole thing. But old colleague of mine, Mark at Cycle World, told me this great story about going on a dual sport ride where he was like this advanced dual sport ride, and it was him and a bunch of people he sort of like knew pretty well, and there was another guy who was there, and he was on like a KLR 650 or some kind of like heavy kind of clunky off-road bike, and a lot of other people were on like real off-road bikes with 11 inches of suspension travel and like good tires and whatever. And he's wearing like work boots and jeans and gardener's gloves, and they were like, hey man, just throwing it out there that like this is an advanced ride. So I just want to make sure that you're okay with that. And the guy was like, yeah, no, I think I'll be okay. And then he told me this great story about how he gets into this section and he like tips over, my buddy tips over and he's like, stuck under his bike. He's trapped under the bike, and he like looks up, and the guy on the KLR just like rides up next to him. He's like, hey, you need a hand? And it turned out this guy could just like levitate a motorcycle. Like he was just unbelievably talented. Yeah. And so that again, that's sort of a judging a book by its cover situation where you're like, you don't want to make assumptions about people either. And in any of these group ride situations, you see the guy on the clapped out old Suzuki from 1983, and you're like, he's not gonna be able to keep up in the twisties. Or you see the guy on the brand new KTM or Husqvarna with brand new gear and brand new boots and brand new goggles, and you're like, oh, this guy's fresh noob is not going to be able to keep up with anyone on the dirt trails. Don't ever make those assumptions. You never know.
I would say if you want to make an assumption, a good one in the ADV and off-road side of things is the person showing up in work boots and gardening gloves. They're really the ones that are going to go faster than you. Like they are the ones that they have no need for airbag vests because they know what they're doing. And we've had a natural transition of like, how do you make friends? How do you find a group to ride with? And I think for a lot of these events, it's a great way to make friends. If you're sitting there in your motorcycling life and you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking, I want people to ride with. I want someone to go out and do an off-road ride with, so I'm not alone in the woods. Or I want to go do a track day, but I want to have someone to share a hamburger with at the end of the day. How do I find riding friends? And it's one of the best ways to do is to show up and do these events. I can't tell you. I could probably do the math on it, but like I have at least 75% of the people that I ride with now that are some of my closest friends that I've done countless trips with, 75% of those people I met at events like this. So my number one PSA is if you are trying to find people to ride with, showing up to some of these events, if you like doing it, you're going to find people that like doing it. And then you just have to find the one that has your same personality. And for someone like myself, it's a little bit weird and hard because my personality is wacky. But for someone like Zach, it's a lot easier. He's got an outgoing personality. He likes talking to people. Everybody loves Zach.
Everybody.
What are some other ways, Zach? What are some other ways?
Well, you got your social media, of course. You could look for groups, and I'm sure there's like Facebook groups or Instagram handles or whatever that have places to go to meet up. I would say if someone asked me, how do I find other people to ride with? How do I find motorcycling friends? I would say start at places that aren't about riding, like a bike night where you can just like go, because then you're not putting yourself into a riding situation right away. You might ride there alone, park your bike amongst a buddy. It's a group park, if you will, not so much a group ride. And that's truly about the social aspect of it. And I think that's like a good place to you dip your toe rather than just jumping in whole hog, But that's it's a great point. Shameless plug. If you are by a Cycle Gear location, a J&P Cycles location, a RevZilla location, we have bike nights all summer long. You show up, you meet some like-minded riders in your neighborhood. Great opportunity to show up and engage with the riding community, but not have to put yourself in a situation where you're riding with somebody that you don't know and you can make friends there. What I would also say, go ahead. No, please.
I insist.
I was going to say, you could complain about your least favorite podcast with these people. You can bond over Highside, Lowside, and how much time you've wasted listening to us ramble on. And then you'll have fast friends in the motorcycling world.
I was gonna make a joke that we were at the intersection and I waved you on, even though, they were the right-hand corner versus the left-hand corner. Anyway, so I want to give a quick summation here for how do you find people to ride with. If you're looking for an adventure or a dual sport ride in your neighborhood, check out the AMA's website. If you're like, I don't know where to find one of these, AMA has an adventure bike series. They have a dual sport series. There's plenty of rides that are not part of that, but it's a great way to start if you're not sure where the beginning is. For the distinguished gentleman's ride or a poker run, check out your local motorcycle dealerships, because they're going to have a flyer on the wall that's going to say, hey, poker run this Saturday, or we're doing something for the distinguished gentleman's ride, which actually just happened. It was in May. And then for track days, reach out to your local track. If you do some reconnaissance, figure out where your closest track is, and then find an organization. There's different organizations that host the track days at your local track. As you'll see if you watch an upcoming episode with Ari and Zach around Minimoto, there's going to be some ways that you can probably affordably get out and ride with friends at a track. And those are where I would start as far as the events that we've talked about today for getting into group rides.
Should we do an engine sound guessing game, Spurjo? What do you think?
I think we're there, my friend.
Yes.
I think we're there.
All right.
Engine sound guessing game is brought to you by Akrapovich for the most premium of exhaust notes. If you really want to, spice up your next group ride, and tune out that stranger that just won't stop talking in your comm system's ear. You can crank up the sweet sounds of your Krapovich exhaust, and they sometimes make it harder to guess what engine sound it is because it just sounds so good that we can't figure out that it's just a Ninja 400 with its little 180 crank.
True enough. Okay, everybody, here we go. On yet another engine sound guessing game adventure. A friendly reminder that you can send your own clip in to be featured on the engine sound guessing game. We just need a 30-second clip of your bike starting up, revving a few times, idling a little bit, and then shutting off. About 30 seconds is ideal. And without further ado, Spurge, let's fire up this engine. If you're playing at home or in the car, as usual, shout it out if you know it. Wow.
Can I throw a metaphor out? I don't know why, but this is, in my mind, what a bear coming out of hibernation sounds like. Like, picture like a grizzly bear coming out of the cave in the springtime.
And taking some deep breaths and being like...
And it's hungry and it's like, feed me.
Well, I think that this is a Honda Grom.
I mean, I think that's the only logical
Sure.
guess.
No, but to your point, it does sound large, right? The engine sounds large. Does it sound large to you, Spurge?
It sounds like a big... How many cylinders? Are we thinking twin? Are we thinking two cylinders?
I'm thinking two. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like it's sucking in a lot of air and putting out a lot of exhaust.
Yeah. 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 It sounds like it's moving a lot of air because that's what an engine is, a big air pump. Let's get a hint, shall we? We got large 2-cylinder engine. That's our first kind of guess here, right?
V-twin or parallel twin?
Ooh, V-twin.
All right.
Yeah, V-twin.
First hint, Zach's wrong. This is a parallel twin.
Interesting. Okay. Wow.
Okay, so a large parallel twin. Triumph Thunderbird.
Yes.
It's a 1600 and a 1700. It was originally a 1600, then they bumped to a 1700. That's a large parallel twin that has kind of like a lopey cruiser sound to it.
It does. Was that a I don't remember what the firing order there was. It a 270 crank or was it
I believe it was a 270.
Was it a 360? It was a 270.
It was a
okay.
270. Yep.
Yeah, I think you might be right because it was supposed to be kind of like thumpy and thundery.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it could also just be a large, 1200 parallel twin from Triumph.
Yeah, but it sounds so kind of like lumbering, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's very kind of chug-a-lug.
Who else is making big parallel twins?
You have big parallel twins. I mean, you got
Yamahas?
your Yamaha Tenere 1200.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think the biggest.
It doesn't sound like a 700. It doesn't sound like a smaller one. It sounds bigger.
No, it sounds much bigger than that. I mean, big parallel twins. I feel like we're missing something here. What are we?
Let's play it one more time for the audience.
Yeah.
Not because we need to listen to it. But
no, we're obviously very convinced. Yeah.
Here's what I'm thinking. And this is kind of where my mind went to Triumph Thunderbird versus like the Bonneville or the Street Twin. Like it doesn't sound like it's revvy. It sounds like it's very lopey and
definitely
like it sounds like a cruiser engine, right? Like
it does 100%. I think Triumph Thunderbird is a great guess. I'm trying to think of like another option. Like what else? What other large, like more than 1000 cc, let's say, parallel twin? What can you think of? I mean, okay,
Well,
more than not Africa Twin. I don't think.
I mean, like, it's interesting
Could be
because
Africa Twin.
I remember the marketing hype behind when the Thunderbird came out, because they hadn't been able to come up with a parallel twin that was balanced, right? They couldn't get above a certain displacement, and Triumph came out with this 1600cc parallel twin that had like counterbalancers that made it, reasonable and smooth. And then all of a sudden you saw other manufacturers following in the footsteps. Africa Twin,
Or like Rebel 1100, that's the same engine. Whatever.
Rebel 1100, maybe, but like,
I mean, it's the same engine as Africa Twin. Same like Honda, big Honda.
That sounds readier to me. Like, I agree. Sounds lopier.
All right, so we have a second hint. We get 2 hints and an answer, right?
Let's see what the second hint is.
Okay.
This manufacturer is based in Europe.
Okay, well, that's not a lot of help.
I mean,
if it's a parallel
it could be
twin,
a Thunderbird. I mean, it's a Triumph.
That's what I mean.
But I think it narrows it down to what other European manufacturers.
Not really.
It eliminates.
It eliminates Japanese bikes. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, it eliminates Japanese bikes. I was thinking like, I already didn't think it was a Japanese bike, so it didn't really help me very much.
Ducati doesn't have a parallel twin to my knowledge.
They did make one way back when.
Sorry, I hit the microphone, audience. I apologize. I whacked the microphone.
Ducati made a parallel twin way back when. Was it not the Panta? Was it the Indiana? No, that was the Cruiser. What was the parallel twin called? I don't really remember. Anyway,
I don't think it's it either way.
No.
What other?
So and
did
like,
Guzzi have a parallel twin?
Not that I know. I think Guzzi's has always been kind of like 90-degree transverse V twin is kind of Guzzi's thing. Maybe there's a like oddball. And
Doesn't sound like the BMW parallel twins.
No, definitely not. I would be flabbergasted if it was a BMW parallel twin. And then you got your, I mean, not Aprilia, KTM.
I'm sticking with my original guess.
I think your original guess is great. I can't find fault in it, Spurg. Let's find out.
I think it's a Triumph Thunderbird.
I think that's a great guess. That's a good bike too, by the way. I like the Triumph Thunderbird.
I want to just go on record and say that this is the first time that I think I've ever gotten something right where like I was actually this 100% sure. So it is a 2013 Triumph Thunderbird Storm.
Wow.
If my memory serves me correctly, this was the 1700cc version. So this was the one that like it got bumped up in displacement. It was louder and a little bit rowdier. Jared sent it in. Jared sent us a audio clip of his 2013 Triumph Thunderbird Storm and says that it does have British Customs straight pipes on it. So it does have a little bit of a flavor of exhaust on it as well.
It does. It does indeed. Well, Spurg, allow me, please, to start a slow clap for you. That was masterful, I gotta say. Right out of the gate, Triumph Thunderbird. Get the heck out of this guy's way. I'm
telling you, this is, I know my wheelhouse. Triumph parallel twins from the 2000s on is my comfort zone. So
yes, indeed.
All right.
Congrats, my friend. That was quite a performance.
Oh, well, thank you. That one felt good. I'm going to get to sleep well tonight.
You should.
If you want to send us your engine sound, please go ahead and take a 30-second clip. We want the bike starting up, let it idle a little bit, give us a couple of good revs, let it idle, and then you can go ahead and shut it off. Send the year, make, model, and any mods that you made over to Highside, Lowside at RevZilla.com. And thanks to Jared for his engine sound.
Indeed.
Let's move on to the t-shirt winner for the day, Zachary.
As a friendly reminder, you can win a t-shirt by submitting an Apple Podcast review or comment on Spotify, or even commenting on the YouTube video that perhaps you are watching. Today's winner is from ABM from Indiana. I'm not sure what ABM stands for, but anyway, it's from Indiana. And ABM from Indiana says, I appreciate your podcast and effort in preparing for each episode. You obviously don't know us very well. I didn't start riding until I was 48. 3 or 4 years after I began riding, my wife gave me the Kenai Peninsula trip with MotoQuest as a Christmas gift. I've got so many wonderful memories from that week. MotoQuest provides phenomenal experience. Yes, I have the best wife ever. This is a very sweet. I thought there was going to be like a twist on this one, but there's no twist. It's just lovely. It's just a lovely letter from ABM from Indiana, who got to go on a MotoQuest ride in Alaska. I think that's where Kenai Peninsula is. Is that right? I hope, I guess. and didn't start riding till they were 48. You love to see it sort of a little bit later in life. That would have been a group ride, come to think of it. MotoQuest, you were on a group ride there. And since ABM from Indiana didn't say anything about how they were frustrated or ticked off about it, I assume it was a positive group ride experience.
I think the takeaways here, for myself, one, it's never too late to start riding a motorcycle, right? I really like that with ABM's anecdote. And then two, for those of you that might be jumping in, maybe this is your first episode of Highside, Lowside. We had done an episode a few episodes back around, how to rent out a motorcycle. We talked about MotoQuest on there. And I think for me, what I liked about this was just a little bit of outside affirmation, if you will. It's not just Zach and I telling you that MotoQuest is a company you should consider, but here's a satisfied customer, ABM from Indiana.
Lovely.
Send us a email, ABM, to highsidelowside@RevZilla.com. We'll get you a shirt over. We just need your shirt size and your address. And if you'd like, if your wife is interested, we would be happy to send your wife a t-shirt as well, as she is the best wife ever.
But yeah, you did say that you love your wife and perhaps she does not want the punishment of wearing a Highside Lowside shirt. That would be fair. Well, moving on is the Highside Lowside comment, Spurjo. I'll let you take this one. I believe this came in from Spotify, did it not?
Spotify Green Eggs over on Spotify said 2 points. One, and let's just go ahead and we'll hit point one and then we can bounce back to point two, I suppose. But point one says, in response to passing in the same lane, which was am I the a-hole from a previous episode.
Previously covered, right.
For those riders with loud pipes, keep in mind that you're putting their head into your pipe at highway RPM as you pass. It will scare the heck out of them if they're not expecting it. Wind noise and how sound travels means that they won't hear you until after you're right next to them. So, we know this is a group ride episode. We figured that this was a good point from Green Eggs to bring up in talking about this episode. Any thoughts there, Zach, on the Highside Lowside comment point one?
No, I think you covered it. I think it's a good point. And you might think your loud pipes are awesome, but it can be quite startling to pass someone, even if they're wearing a helmet and earplugs and all that jazz. So it's a good thing to keep in mind. This is a part of preaching what we have already said on this episode, which is sort of like, have others around you in mind when you're on a group ride.
So point number two says, you often state that we can support your good work by buying goods from RevZilla. How can those of us from the UK and elsewhere support it? And
wow,
I like this point in the fact that we obviously are able to do this because of the good, gracious will of the powers that be at RevZilla. They let us produce this content. And we do encourage you to, if you want to, if you like what you hear and you want to, you're going to buy a helmet anyway, buying it from RevZilla does help us out. We also understand that we have a decent foreign audience members that are listening outside the United States, and that it might not be feasible for you to order your helmet from RevZilla. So if you want to show a little support and you don't feel like paying, shipping charges to a foreign country, maybe you buy your Motul products locally, but then make a comment, send a little message to your Motul rep and say, hey, I'm buying Motul from you here in the UK, but it's because of these two knuckleheads over across the pond doing this podcast that has inspired me to get my can of chain lube from you.
That's a good idea. I also like just sharing in general, like you got, perhaps you have your own motorcycling friends on whom you go on group rides with, you go, whatever. Maybe you have people you ride with. And you could tell them, hey, you gotta listen to this Highside Lowside podcast. You'll get a real kick out of these guys. That would help us. You could do that.
I love that.
Also, a neck tattoo of our names is fine too. That's if you wanted to do something like that, that would be a good way to support us.
Yes, nothing like Zack and Spurg spelled wrong on your neck to solidify.
That's true. Please do send us an email to make sure you get the spelling right of your tattoo before you do that. But
and send us a photo of your neck tattoo, and we'll cover the shipping to the UK for you for your next order. So Green Eggs,
yeah,
we're going to
that
give
is
you a t-shirt as well. So make sure, Green Eggs, if you're listening to this and you were the one that left us a Spotify comment, shoot us an email to highsidelowside@RevZilla.com. And we will figure out a way to ship you a t-shirt and pay for the shipping over there to the UK for you. We're going to do that for you.
Burjo, making big promises. I like it. Okay. Well, that's a lovely comment, Green Eggs. We appreciate it. You as well, ABM in Indiana. Thanks for your messages and your support and for listening to the pod. Spurjo, it's happened again. We talked about motorcycles longer than producer Chase wanted us to. But this is where we remind you, the lovely listener or viewer of this podcast, to leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube. Send us comments, questions, concerns, and engine sounds to highside@revzilla.com. And share the pod with your friends if you think we deserve it.
So Zach, as we come to an end of another episode, and this one kind of focused on group rides, are there any final takeaways for yourself and how you engage with others whilst riding a motorcycle?
You know what? I found myself when we were gathering all the stuff we were going to say for this episode, I really just feel like it's about communication, one way or another, whether you're communicating how you think the group ride's going to go, or you're communicating while you're on the group ride and how things are going, or you're communicating after the group ride and how things went. I think it's just important to be open and honest with those you're sharing the road with, because with a motorcycle group ride, it's a little bit more intimate and kind of cohesive experience than it is just like caravanning down the road in a car.
Yeah.
Obviously, the risks are higher and the feels are higher, and so it's important to communicate. That's what I took away from it.
So I remember going into pre-pro for this, and we were talking about doing a group ride episode, and I remember thinking, I don't really like group rides. If I'm going to go out and ride, I want to be by myself. But I forgot about adventure bikes, and I forgot about dual sports. And I realized that the majority of the riding I do is group rides. And there was a moment over this past weekend, I was with my buddy Carlos, and we were riding through this ATV park, and we were having the best time. We were just ripping, and I'm trying to keep up with him, and we're trying to, I catch him and then he pulls away, and we were just laughing in our helmets. We're spitting mud. We're covered. We were in this mud bog. It was just like two of us out in the woods, cause we were, the group spreads out.
Sure.
It was the most fun that I have had since I can't remember. And it's just like some of the best memories that I have had with motorcycling have been via group rides, via some of these dual sport or adventure or track events, right? I just can't recommend it enough. Now, and again, get rid of the stereotypes of what you might think of as a group ride, and maybe kind of expand your horizons a little bit to figure out what kind of riding you like to do and surrounding yourself with like-minded folks. That's the takeaway that I hope you leave with today. Whether it's adventure rides or poker runs or track days, find 2 or 3 other people that share some of your same sensibilities and go out and have a great time, because it really can enhance what we all love about two wheels.
Well said, sir. I hope that you all out there got something out of this, a laugh or two. I hope you didn't cry. But if you did, I hope you learned something. And I guess that brings us to the conclusion of this episode of Highside, Lowside, and we very much hope to see you on the next one.
Till next time.